This is Nightly Business Report with Tyler Matheson and Sue Herrera.
The Putin rally. Oil gushes to multi-month highs as Russia's president supports supply limits, and energy shares take stocks along for the ride.
Phone flame out. Samsung struggles as retailers in the U.S. stop selling even the replacement Note 7 phones. Those were the ones that were not supposed to catch fire, but are. What's next for Korea's biggest brand?
Your money, your vote. How the investment markets interpret the presidential race right now. Those stories and more tonight on Nightly Business Report for Monday, October 10th.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome. With politics top of mind for just about every investor, stocks began the week with gains, powered by a rally in the price of oil. And that can be attributed to a statement from a man whose name has come up a lot lately, Russian President Vladimir Putin. He said he supported international efforts to limit the supply of crude. Oversupply has dogged the energy market for quite a while. Putin's remarks followed similar comments from a Saudi official. And with that, crude rose 3%, settling above $51 a barrel. And that lifted the broader market. The Dow Jones Industrial Average was up 88 points to 18,329. The Nasdaq gained 36, and the S&P 500 added 9. Steve Sedgwick reports from a meeting of major oil producers in Istanbul.
Oil prices got a double boost on Monday as two of the world's largest producers of oil actually pledged to support prices. First of all, here at the World Energy Congress in Istanbul, one of the largest gatherings of oil producers in the world, we heard from the Saudi oil minister Al-Falih, who said actually he thought it was very likely that OPEC would be able to put meat on the bones of a deal agreed in Algiers in September and actually carry through its first output cut since 2008. Al-Falih added that he would be speaking to his counterpart Alexander Novak of Russia in the next couple of days to see if this could be expanded to non-OPEC members. Then this afternoon we saw President Putin of Russia as a guest of President Erdogan of Turkey building bridges between the two countries following conflict at the tail end of 2015. But Mr. Putin made a very interesting contribution to the oil debate, saying that Russia was ready to join any output freeze and potentially put a cap on extra production at the moment. That boosted oil prices even further. Mr. Putin saying that failure to do so would hurt investment and potentially create more volatility in the world oil markets. It remains to be seen whether Russia and Saudi can carry through these plans, but both were very supportive for the price of oil on Monday. This is Steve Sedgwick for Nightly Business Report in Istanbul, Turkey.
Well, the market also likes certainty, so investors are watching politics very closely as we enter the home stretch of the presidential race. According to Nielsen, more than 66 million Americans watched the debate last night. Mike Santoli tells us how Wall Street views the race for the White House right now.
The markets have not quite called the election for Hillary Clinton, but Wall Street has grown more confident in recent days that the odds have moved in her favor. The relationship between financial markets and election outcomes is indirect and hard to prove. But on balance, stocks have generally been stronger when Clinton's odds of victory are rising. This pattern held following a tumultuous weekend in which Donald Trump lost the support of dozens of Republican officials after a tape of his lewd comments about women in 2005 was released. Stock futures climbed modestly as soon as they opened Sunday evening and continued higher on Monday, as electronic betting markets to take wagers on the election had Clinton's odds of winning rising toward 80%. Mexico's currency, meantime, climbed by 2% against the U.S. dollar on Monday. The peso has become a key barometer of Trump's position in the race on the assumption that his trade and immigration policies would hurt the Mexican economy if he were elected. Wall Street policy analysts say investors don't necessarily have an outright political tilt toward Clinton, but that markets prefer the more predictable status quo candidate. Yet markets also tend to do better under divided government, with control of the White House and Congress split between the parties. Clinton's latest surge in the polls has placed Republican control in the Senate in jeopardy and even sparked some talk that the House could shift to Democrats. While Republican sway over the House seems reasonably secure, a Democratic sweep could make investors anxious about what that could mean for regulation of several industries. Shares of drug companies, banks, and oil companies could come under pressure in such a scenario. And investors might also brace for an upper income tax increase that could lead them to sell stocks to realize gains in the current tax year. Still, many experts are reluctant to declare Clinton a sure winner. For one thing, this race has been volatile, with significant swings in the national polls from week to week. For another, betting markets were dead wrong on the Brexit vote in the UK back in June. Markets were blindsided by the vote to leave the EU, and investors are wary of another populist shock, which means Wall Street has 4 more weeks of uncertainty before it can fully price in the next 4 years of U.S. leadership. For Nightly Business Report, I'm Mike Santoli at the New York Stock Exchange.
And an important topic in all elections, but especially this one, is taxes and whether we will pay more or less under a new administration. In last night's debate, the issue came up, but it wasn't clear-cut. Steve Liesman takes a look at what we know and what we don't about the candidates' plans.
A debate over taxes finding a sliver of airtime amid the personal attacks that dominated last night's meeting of the 2 presidential candidates. Here's some of the controversial exchange.
We're cutting taxes for the middle class, and I will tell you, we are cutting a big league for the middle class. And I will tell you, Hillary Clinton is raising your taxes, folks. You can look at me. She's raising your taxes really high. And what that's going to do is a disaster for the country.
So it's true. Trump is proposing tax cuts for the middle class, but it appears to be false that all the low and middle class will benefit. New York University law professor and former Obama aide Lily Batchelder says 7.8 million mostly middle-class single-parent families with children will actually see tax increases. Some because Trump would repeal personal exemptions, others because he would repeal head of household filing status, and still others would move up from a lower to a higher tax bracket under Trump's 3-bracket plan. The Trump campaign has not disputed this, but said those families will be allowed to file under the old system. Tax experts think that's a recipe for further confusion. As for Trump's claim that Clinton proposes, quote, raising your taxes really high, this appears mostly untrue, if you consider the vast majority of Americans anyway. She will raise taxes on the wealthy, in some cases quite substantially, but she said no one under $250,000 will see a tax increase. The Tax Policy Center in Washington did find that some people in the 90th percentile and below would see very small tax increases, but that was due to Clinton's change in corporate taxes, not income taxes. Experts say both sides need to provide more detail to allow for better analysis. But it's more likely both candidates are taxing themselves with details of personal attacks than details of personal income tax. For Nightly Business Report, I'm Steve Liesman.
Warren Buffett fired back at Donald Trump on taxes today. The billionaire investor responded to Trump's claim in last night's debate that he, Buffett, took a massive tax deduction. Trump acknowledged for the first time that he used a business loss of nearly $1 billion in 1995 to avoid federal income taxes, though he did not say how long he used the so-called loss carry forward. In a statement, Buffett said, "I have paid federal income tax every year since 1944 when I was 13. I have copies of all 72 of my returns and none uses a carry forward." Buffett said he had an adjusted gross income of $11.6 million in 2015, took $5.5 million in deductions, including $3.5 million for charity. He says he paid $1.8 million in federal income tax. Buffett, who is a supporter of Hillary Clinton, also challenged Trump to release his returns.
In corporate news, Bristol-Myers Squibb is facing a major setback with its lung cancer drug. Data presented at a medical meeting over the weekend showed patients fared worse on Bristol's drug than those taking chemotherapy. Meantime, a rival lung cancer drug from Merck showed strong benefits in a similar late-stage study. That sent shares of Bristol-Myers sharply lower. Merck rose nearly 2%.
The crisis at Samsung deepens. The company has halted production of its replacement Galaxy 7 Note phones following a global recall of 2.5 million of those smartphones on reports the phones caught fire. And now Sprint has joined AT&T, Verizon, and T-Mobile in suspending sales of the replacement device. This phone forced the emergency evacuation of a Southwest Airlines flight in Louisville, Kentucky last week.
Smoke in the cabin on the ramp at the gate.
Brian Green says the phone began to burn inside his pocket. He says it was a replacement issued for the Galaxy 7 Note he turned in as part of a Samsung recall last month. The serial number indicated it should have been okay. Samsung has yet to confirm the incident involved a new Note 7. Those Note 7s, though, have been blamed for dozens of fires, damaging a garage in South Carolina, a Jeep in Florida. Without specifying what the problems are, Samsung said it is halting production of the Note 7, quote, in order to take further steps to ensure quality and safety matters. That's in stark contrast to its initial response last month to questions about battery charging levels in its replacement Note 7s. The issue does not pose a safety concern, said the company. Today, Verizon, T-Mobile, Sprint, and AT&T stopped issuing replacement Note 7s.
We've taken the extraordinary step to stop exchanging them out of an abundance of caution until Samsung really does the retail work to understand if these replacement phones have an issue or not.
Last month, Samsung blamed one of its battery suppliers for the initial problems, saying it stopped using that company and that it had not used that company for any of its replacement phones in the U.S. But problems persist. Another replacement Note 7 started smoking in the hand of a 13-year-old Minnesota girl on Friday, and a Samsung customer in Richmond, Virginia, said he woke up Sunday morning to a loud noise, smoke, and flames coming from his replacement Note 7. Halting sales of the Note 7 in the fourth quarter could cost Samsung $630 million in sales. But that may not be Samsung's only problem. The world's top seller of TV sets and South Korea's most profitable company is also dealing with reports that some of its washing machines have exploded. The Samsung brand could be in for an extended spin cycle.
I just actually ordered the new Pixel. Just having too many issues with Samsung. I can't risk it.
I think this could be a serious marketing problem for them. Especially the more publicity it gets.
Dean Crutchfield joins us now to discuss how much damage he thinks the ongoing problems at Samsung could have on the Samsung brand. Good to see you again, Dean. Welcome back.
Great to be back.
I assume that you agree with the people that we just heard from on that tape that this is a very serious issue for them.
Usually you say a brand's on fire and it's a good thing, but here we have a brand like Samsung and it's literally on self-destruct. It's corporate greed, it's brand arrogance, and there is a painful solution ahead.
Why were they so slow to react? Is it because they're not domiciled here in the United States? Why?
I think they basically blew the 4 cardinal rules of, crisis management. In the first place, when crisis hits and news and social media burst, you want the CEO to stand up and look at the problem straight in the eye, and you don't want them to hide behind formal statements. They did that. The second issue is you can't have lengthy procedures or be bureaucratic. They've done that. Thirdly, they need to respond boldly. Clearly, they didn't respond within the first 24 hours of the actual thing happening. It took them a week. That was bad in itself. And then finally, the big boy is hide nothing, tell all. And we know there's a smoking gun here regarding the fact the company was aware, senior management was aware that these problems existed with their battery. So that's a really big problem facing them as a brand.
You say that there's a painful solution ahead. What would that be?
They've got to dump the Note 7. They've got to dump the Galaxy Note 7 series. There's no two ways about it. Who wants it now? It's tarnished goods. It basically has to go away. They're going to take a sales hit of $650 million in the next quarter. What about hitting, your brand value by $15 or $20 billion if you don't, sort this problem out now?
This points to the idea. They make lots of things beyond washing machines, lots of televisions. I have them in my own home.
Yeah.
Does this problem with the cell phone bleed over into the brand perception and the willingness of customers around the world to buy Samsung?
Well, that's it. The court of public opinion's out there right now, and I don't think they're going to come back with a positive verdict, whether it's a washing machine or a phone. This does bleed across their brand. It impacts it in a major way, and it's about integrity, and it's about trustworthiness. And both of those are under the spotlight right now.
All right, Dean, always good to have you with us.
It's great to be here.
Dean Crutchfield with the Dean Crutchfield Company.
And still ahead, assessing the damage from Hurricane Matthew as the cleanup continues. The billionaire Carl Icahn will close the Trump Taj Mahal in Atlantic City, New Jersey. This after he was unable to reach a labor agreement with thousands of unionized workers and said he could no longer operate the casino without losing money. Icahn bought the Taj Mahal out of bankruptcy in 2014. 5 Atlantic City casinos have closed in just the past 2 years.
As North Carolina continues to struggle with flooding, early assessments of damage from deadly Hurricane Matthew are starting to materialize. Morgan Brennan reports.
It was the worst hurricane to hit the region in more than a decade, though not quite as disastrous as feared. As the storm headed toward Florida as a Category 4 hurricane, estimates of insurance losses spiked upwards of $25 billion, with experts warning Matthew could be a top 5 storm in terms of damage. But after the hurricane lost some strength and resisted landfall up much of the coast, estimates have come down. CoreLogic says 1.5 million homes and businesses likely sustained wind or storm surge damage, putting insured property losses between $4 and $6 billion, not including flooding, which the federal government insures against, and lost business. It's a meaningful sum, but still relatively small compared to $40 billion for Hurricane Katrina and $20 billion for Superstorm Sandy. Still, analysts do expect this to dent some insurers' fourth quarter results.
The hits will be meaningful but manageable. I would expect, I think of, kind of the bigger names, most likely somebody say like an Allstate, because they have such a large presence in homeowners, will probably take some material losses. Interestingly enough, I think you could potentially also see Progressive take some losses. That would be something of a new development for them.
Many national carriers limited their exposure in Florida due to strict regulations. But small cap names, including Universal Insurance Holdings, Heritage Financial, and Federated National Holding Company, have large Florida operations. The reason those stocks tumbled as the storm approached. But none of that takes into account the broader economic impact. Risk assessment firm Kinetics Analysis thinks that could still make this storm a top 10 disaster event. $10 to $15 billion, including insured losses, flood damage, and the impact of lost business. The evacuation of millions of people could alone cost $3 billion. But as people return to their homes and cleanup begins, it will take some time to sort out the true cost of weathering Matthew. For Nightly Business Report, I'm Morgan Brennan.
Twitter continues to tumble as takeover interest reportedly dwindles further, and that is where we begin tonight's market focus. Over the weekend, Bloomberg reported that potential suitors, including Salesforce.com, were unlikely to make a bid for Twitter, and this follows a report from industry website Recode last week that said Apple, Disney, and Google were likely out. Salesforce CEO Mark Benioff had expressed interest in the social media company, but stopped short of saying he would make a bid. Result? Shares tumble 11.5% today to $17.56. Manufacturing equipment maker Dover slashed its profit and revenue forecast for the year. The company cited production problems in its refrigeration unit and lower capital spending in some markets. Shares of Dover were off more than 7% to $66.69. And the pharmaceutical company Novartis said its experimental drug for treating breast cancer slowed the progression of the disease when used in combination with another therapy. The company said previously it would seek approval for the treatment from U.S. and European regulators this year. Shares were down marginally to $77.75.
And another cancer drug shows promise. Biotech company Tesaro said its developmental ovarian cancer treatment performed well during a trial. The news also prompted Bank of America and Merrill Lynch to upgrade Tesaro's stock to buy from neutral. Shares surged nearly 19% to $117.91. Biotech company Illumina warned of a sales shortfall for the third quarter. The company, which focuses on genetics-driven research, said the weaker-than-expected results are due to less demand for its sequencing instruments. Illumina also said fourth quarter results will be flat to just slightly higher. Shares plunged 24% in after hours, but they finished the regular session up 36 cents to $184.85.
If you don't work a traditional 9-to-5 job, you're not alone. According to a new study, the number of people making a living as independent workers is growing faster than even originally thought. And as Deirdre Boza reports from San Francisco, it's not just changing the way Americans work, but also the way we live.
Grab a car share. post your home for a weekend getaway, or hire a freelancer to help you move. Rarely a day goes by that we don't hear about the shared economy and how it's transforming the way we work and function. But up until now, it's been difficult to quantify. McKinsey is out with a report that aims to do just that. It found that the independent workforce, made up of anyone who gets paid by task or sale, from Lyft drivers to freelance plumbers, is even bigger than official data suggests, and growing fast.
There's more people doing independent work than we had anticipated. So in the United States, we found that between 22 and 28% of the working age population is involved in independent work and deriving independent incomes doing this kind of work.
That's nearly 70 million people that put together their own income streams and shape their own work lives. And the majority do it because they want to and not because they need to. Like Baron Lambert, a personal trainer that has built his business in the gig economy using Thumbtack's online marketplace.
I get to set my own schedule. I get to work with the people I choose to work with, whether it be clients or new trainers that we bring on. And I get to do what I want.
But it's not just millennials like Baron who make up the independent workforce. In fact, McKinsey found that they represent less than a quarter of this space, while seniors, defined as those over 65 years old, make up nearly 10% of the group. The survey also revealed a workforce that is diverse in terms of gender, income, and education levels, and cuts across all occupations and industries.
You could say the heart of the gig economy is here in San Francisco. Down Market Street, you've got Uber's headquarters, and south of Market is Airbnb. But while gig gets all the headlines, it represents just 15% of the independent workforce. A vast majority of independent workers still don't yet use digital platforms. That could represent a big growth opportunity for this dynamic workforce. For Nightly Business Report, I'm Deirdre Boza, San Francisco.
Coming up, why your supermarket may be loaded with fake food, and it's costing consumers billions. But first, a look at how commodities and currencies fared today. The bond market was closed for the Columbus Day holiday. Here's a look at what to watch for tomorrow. Alcoa reports earnings, and it will be the last report before the company splits into two. The Supreme Court will hear a patent dispute case between Apple and Samsung. Yum shareholders will be looking for details on its China business spinoff at its Investor Day, and that is what to watch for tomorrow.
Some criminals have turned their attention to food. In the quest for a profit, they replace pricey food with cheaper alternatives or water liquids down with less expensive additives. And as Andrea Day reports, food fraud is costing consumers billions.
Extra virgin olive oil has sort of a long, rich history of fraud.
From olive oil that's not entirely extra virgin to honey.
You can't tell that it's been cut with high fructose corn syrup.
According to best-selling author Larry Olmsted, our supermarkets are loaded with fake foods, like coffee cut with corn and even sawdust, and seafood.
Nationwide, about a third of our seafood is mislabeled at retail. You can't tell red snapper, which is really expensive, from tilapia, which is really cheap. Most of the time you buy and pay for red snapper, you get something like tilapia.
And consumers wind up paying the price. According to the Michigan State University Food Fraud Initiative, food fraud costs $30 to $40 billion every year worldwide. And dining out?
Very few people realize that the restaurants are sort of the Wild West. They don't have to adhere to the same kind of labeling rules retailers have.
Food fraud has and does cause illnesses, and it has actually caused deaths in consumers.
Karen Everstein is a scientist at USP. The group sets standards for medicines and foods. On our watch list, processed foods.
We're sourcing ingredients from all over the world and putting them together into a finished food product. This increases the opportunities for fraud.
Like frozen pizza that can have dozens of ingredients. USP created a database for companies looking to prevent fraud.
You can quickly identify which ingredients are prone to fraud, what are the adulterants that have been used, and which of those adulterants might be hazardous. So if you look at something like paprika, it's been adulterated with 19 different substances. So if you're a manufacturer and you're being duped by one of your suppliers, and that comes to light, certainly there's brand damage.
The FDA and the USDA are just two agencies that regulate food. According to the FDA, combating food fraud is the responsibility of both industry and regulatory authorities. The FDA inspects manufacturers to make sure they're meeting requirements for good manufacturing practices and also conducts label reviews during these inspections. And the USDA tells us it, quote, works every day at establishments ensuring that meat, poultry, and processed egg products entering commerce are safe, wholesome, and correctly labeled.
So what can you do? Well, Olmsted tries to avoid heavily processed foods because they can hide a lot of fake ingredients. And when you can, buy foods in their most whole form, like coffee beans, whole fish, and cheese, so you always know exactly what you're getting. I'm Andrea Day for Nightly Business Report.
Finally tonight, two professors, one from Harvard, the other from MIT, have been awarded the Nobel Prize in Economics for their work on contract theory. According to the Royal Academy of Sciences, their work has helped shape business, finance, and public policy. And that'll do it for Nightly Business Report for tonight. Thanks for joining us. I'm Sue Herrera.
And I'm Tyler Mathisen. Thanks from me as well. Have a great evening, everybody, and we'll see you back here tomorrow night.